How would you react if the driver who has just arrived at Ferrari not only equals, but clearly surpasses his star in just a few laps? Because that is exactly what happened at Monza, where Lewis Hamilton's data not only surprised Charles Leclerc, but completely shocked the entire Ferrari leadership, including its own CEO, after discovering a level of performance that no one expected to see so soon. The context in which all this occurs is key to understanding why the impact within Ferrari was so great, because we are not talking about just any test or an isolated day with no competitive relevance, but rather an extremely delicate moment within the development of the SF26, just when the team needed to confirm if the technical path they had chosen was the correct one or if, on the contrary, they were repeating past mistakes that had already cost them entire seasons. Ferrari arrived at Monza with enormous internal pressure, accumulated not only by the irregular start to the season, but also by the urgent need to validate a package of updates that had been specifically designed to change the course of the championship. A package that, according to Maranello simulations, should definitely bring them closer to the real fight for victories, but which had not yet been tested in real track conditions. That is why this filming day, limited to just 200 kilometers, had much more weight than it seemed, because within those few kilometers Ferrari had something much more important at stake than a simple promotional shoot. The confirmation that its technical development made sense was at stake. The structure of the day was completely planned, with no room for improvisation, with Charles Leclerc in charge of opening the day in the morning, assuming the role of initial reference for the team, something logical considering that he is the driver who best knows the behavior of the car and the ideal starting point to evaluate any improvement. And Leclerc complied. His 19 laps, with a best time of 1 minute and 27.1 seconds, were not only consistent, but represented exactly what Ferrari hoped to see. A car that was stable, predictable, and aligned with the simulation data, which at the time generated a feeling of calm within the team, because everything seemed to fit within the established plan. But that tranquility was deceptive, because Ferrari had not yet seen the real limit of the car. And that's where Hamilton comes in. When the Briton takes the SF26 in the afternoon session, he does so in a completely different context, not only because of the track conditions, but because he already had a clear previous reference to work with, which allowed him to focus his run not on validating the car, but on pushing it further. And that nuance changes everything. Because while Leclerc executed a clean and controlled program, Hamilton began to build something different, a pace progression that not only showed adaptation, but a deep reading of the car's behavior, something that was directly reflected in the lap times. It was not an isolated magical turn. It was a constant evolution. A sequence of turns where each attempt seemed to bring him closer to a point that Ferrari had not yet fully explored, until he finally breaks the barrier and sets that 1 minute and 26.585 seconds that completely changes the narrative of the day. And in that moment, everything inside Ferrari changes. Because it is no longer about validating improvements. It's about understanding why Hamilton is seeing something in the car that Leclerc hadn't exploited to that same magnitude. And that is the first major narrative crack within the team. It is not a crisis, but it is a sign. A sign that SF26 has hidden potential, and that not everyone is extracting it in the same way. The most important thing about this act is not the time difference itself, that's what that difference represents. Because Ferrari, for the first time in 2026, not only has a car that works, but a driver who seems capable of taking it beyond expectations. And that completely changes the internal rules of the game. The real turning point was not Hamilton's time itself. It was what he began to reveal when Ferrari sat down to analyze the data in depth, because that is where the initial surprise transforms into something much more uncomfortable and, at the same time, much more promising for the team. Until that moment, everything could be justified with typical variables of a test. Different fuel loads, engine maps, track conditions, even completely different programs between both drivers, something that within Ferrari they know perfectly well and that always forces the times to be taken with caution. But when engineers started overlaying telemetry, the story changed completely. Because it wasn't just that Hamilton was faster. It was where he was being faster. The lines, the braking points, the way in which he managed the corner entry and, above all, how he managed to maintain a higher minimum speed in key sectors, began to show a pattern that did not entirely coincide with what Leclerc had done in the morning, and that was what really set off all the internal alarms. Hamilton wasn't simply executing better. I was interpreting the car differently. And that detail is critical. Because when a driver finds performance in areas where the car did not clearly seem to offer it, what you have in front of you is not just a difference in style, it is a possible redefinition of the optimal behavior of the car. Ferrari then began to understand that the SF26 had a broader performance window than they had projected in simulation, but also more complex, more demanding and probably more difficult to exploit consistently, something that explains why Leclerc, despite his experience with the team, had not reached that same level in that initial session. Because although it was known internally that Hamilton could provide experience, leadership and technical ability, what they did not expect was that, in such a limited session, he would be able to unlock that level of performance in such an obvious way. And this generates an immediate consequence within the team. Ferrari is beginning to rethink how it is going to structure the development of the car from now on. Because if the SF20 SIX's peak performance is closer to Hamilton's style than Leclerc's, then every update, every tweak, and every future technical decision could start to head in that direction. And that is a huge change. A silent change, but decisive. In addition, there is another detail that reinforces this entire scenario: consistency. Hamilton not only set an outstanding fast lap, but built a sequence of times that showed stability within that new level of performance, something that is even more valuable than an isolated lap, because it indicates that it was not an accident, nor a specific circumstance, but a real trend within the behavior of the car. And in Formula One, when a piece of information stops being specific and becomes a trend, everything changes. Therefore, what started as a simple filming day ends up becoming one of the most important moments of the season for Ferrari. Because they not only validated their improvement package, they discovered something much more dangerous. They discovered that within their own team, a new hierarchy may be emerging. And then we reach the most critical point of this whole story, because after the analysis, after the initial surprise, and after understanding that the SF26 has more potential than Ferrari believed, the true consequence of all this appears: the decisions that will define the team's immediate future. Because Ferrari now can't go back. He can no longer ignore what he saw at Monza. You can no longer treat this data as a simple test anomaly. Because when you have clear, repeatable, consistent evidence that there is a faster path, you are obligated to follow it. And that path today has its own name: Lewis Hamilton. This is where the impact becomes real pressure, both on a technical and sporting level, because Ferrari faces a dilemma that could mark its entire season: develop the car around the base that Leclerc already dominated, or begin to evolve it towards the direction that Hamilton has revealed. And this is no small decision, because choosing one path means sacrificing the other. If Ferrari decides to adapt the SF26 towards that performance range that Hamilton has unlocked, it will probably be betting on a more extreme car, more difficult to drive, but also with a much higher ceiling, something that has historically defined champion single-seaters. But if he decides to stay on a more conservative line, aligned with what Leclerc already controls, he will be ensuring consistency, but perhaps limiting his maximum potential against direct rivals. And this is where the real internal conflict comes in. Because this is no longer just engineering. This is pilot management. This is leadership. This is hierarchy. Charles Leclerc, who has been the pillar of the project for years, now finds himself in a completely new situation. One in which for the first time he has within the same garage a driver who can not only match him, but who has already shown that he can go further in real conditions. And that changes everything. Change the team dynamic. It changes the way data is interpreted. It even changes the way strategic decisions are made. Because Ferrari, although it never says it publicly, will always lean its development towards whoever gives it the most performance. And at Monza, that driver was Hamilton. Furthermore, there is a detail that closes this scenario and makes it even more compelling: the context of the improvement package. Because these updates were not a minor evolution. They were Ferrari's great leap to change the course of the season. And the fact that Hamilton has been the one who has best exploited them in his first real contact with them further reinforces his weight within the project. It's not just that it was faster. It has validated the path. And that, within a Formula One team, is worth more than any speech. Therefore, what Ferrari has discovered at Monza is not just performance. It's a new reality. One where the SF26 has the potential to be a winning car, but also one where that potential might be more tied to Hamilton than many were willing to accept. And this is where it all gets really interesting. Because if Ferrari makes the decision to follow that path, it will not only be betting on a technical concept. You will be redefining the internal balance of the team. You will be changing your present, and probably also your future. And in the end, it all comes down to a single idea that Ferrari cannot ignore. Monza was not just another test, it was the moment in which the team discovered that its internal reality had already changed, because the data not only confirmed that the SF26 works, but also revealed something much deeper. The true potential of the car had not yet been fully exploited, until Hamilton took to the track. What impacted the CEO of Ferrari and Leclerc was not simply a difference in times, it was understanding that within the same garage there are two different ways of interpreting the car, and that one of them, at least at this point, is taking the car to a level that not even the simulations themselves had anticipated. And that changes absolutely everything. Because Ferrari now not only has to develop a competitive car, it has to decide which direction to take it, knowing that that decision can define not only its performance in the season, but also the internal balance between its two drivers. Hamilton has not arrived just to add experience. It has arrived to mark a reference. And most importantly, he has already done it. Meanwhile, Leclerc faces for the first time a scenario where he is no longer the only point of technical support within the team, and that opens a new narrative that can become one of the most determining stories of the entire season. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.